A quiet morning inside a private hospital suddenly spirals into chaos when a furious mistress storms into the maternity ward and kicks a pregnant woman to the ground, while the millionaire husband stands frozen, watching it happen. But neither of them realizes that the man running this hospital isn't just any doctor. He's her uncle, and when he discovers what they've done, justice comes faster than anyone expects. What unfolds next is a fight for truth, redemption, and the power of one man who turns pain into purpose and tragedy into change. Stay with me, because this story will show you how compassion can rise from cruelty, and you won't believe the ending until you hear it. Tell us what time you're listening and where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The air inside the maternity room felt still, almost sacred. A low mechanical hum blended with the soft rhythm of a fetal heartbeat echoing through the monitor beside the bed. Claire Donovan, 30 years old and 7 months pregnant, rested her hand gently on her stomach. The sound calmed her, each pulse reminding her that her baby was safe for now. The nurse had stepped out to collect her test results, leaving her alone in a quiet moment she rarely found anymore. Her marriage to Ethan Hale, the real estate millionaire everyone admired, had become a cold performance. He used to text her between meetings, leave small notes on her pillow, kiss her belly each morning before work. Now he sent assistants to deliver messages. His voice had grown distant, his eyes always elsewhere. Claire still believed love could survive distance. She still hoped this baby would remind him of the man he once was. She adjusted the blanket across her knees and smiled faintly at the monitor. "You're strong, sweetheart," she whispered. "You and me will be all right." The machine answered her with another steady beat. That tiny rhythm had become her reason to keep breathing. The door opened suddenly. The noise startled her so much she flinched. Ethan stood in the doorway, wearing his tailored suit, expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent light. For one suspended second, relief crossed her face. He came. Maybe he remembered. But then another figure appeared behind him. A tall woman in a crimson dress, poised, confident, beautiful in a way that looked rehearsed. "Ethan," Claire said softly, confusion thick in her voice. "What is she doing here?" Vanessa Cole's lips curved into a perfect smile, the kind meant to wound. "He wanted me to see where the magic happens," she said coolly. Her perfume filled the small room. The scent of roses clashed with the sterile air. Ethan shifted awkwardly but did not deny it. "Vanessa, please," he muttered, eyes darting toward Claire's face. Claire pushed herself up slightly on the bed, her pulse racing. "You brought her here," she said. "To my appointment. To my baby's appointment." "It's not what you think," Ethan said, his voice low but unconvincing. "We were meeting with someone from the hospital board." Vanessa laughed under her breath. "Stop pretending, Ethan. She deserves the truth." Then she looked at Claire, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. "He's been trying to tell you for months. You just refuse to listen." Color drained from Claire's face. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Vanessa stepped closer, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. "You think carrying his child will keep him," she said. "That's adorable, but pathetic." Ethan finally spoke, his voice trembling between guilt and irritation. "Vanessa, enough." No, she snapped back. "You've let her manipulate you long enough." Her eyes flicked toward Claire. "Look at her. She still thinks she's the victim." Claire's vision swam. She could feel her heart pounding too fast, her skin damp with sweat. "Please stop," she whispered. "I can't do this right now." Vanessa folded her arms. "Oh, I think you can. You've been performing for years. Why stop now?" The tension in the room thickened until even the machines seemed to hesitate. Claire gripped the edge of the bed to steady herself. A sharp pain shot across her abdomen. She winced and gasped. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice barely audible. Ethan took one step forward, unsure what to do. Vanessa's eyes narrowed with contempt. "You see," she said coldly, "always the drama, always the victim." Claire tried to reach for the call button, but her hand trembled. "I need a doctor," she said through clenched teeth. Vanessa moved closer, towering over her. "Here's a piece of advice, Claire. Learn when to let go. You're embarrassing yourself." Her words felt like ice pressed against skin. Claire tried to stand but stumbled, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the side rail. The pain sharpened, tearing through her like fire. "Please," she cried. "Don't." Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't deserve him." Then, in a burst of anger, she lifted her leg and kicked Claire's shin with deliberate force. The sound of impact echoed through the room. Claire's cry filled the air as her body folded against the exam table. The monitor crashed to the floor with a heavy clang. The rhythmic heartbeat faltered, its steady tone breaking into erratic blips. The metallic scent of blood spread quickly, staining the pale sheet beneath her. Claire collapsed to her knees, both arms cradling her stomach, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The room spun. Her hair clung to her damp face, her lips trembling. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "My baby." Vanessa stood motionless for a moment, chest rising fast, eyes wild with what looked like satisfaction and fear tangled together. Then she straightened, smoothing her hair as if nothing had happened. Her reflection in the metal cabinet stared back at her, composed, detached, untouched. Ethan remained frozen near the door, face drained of color, unable to process what had just occurred. The man who once promised protection now couldn't move. His wife was on the ground bleeding, the woman beside him breathing hard, her red dress glowing under harsh fluorescent light like a wound that refused to close. Claire tried to crawl toward the corner of the bed, reaching blindly for the monitor cable, as if the sound of her baby's heartbeat could save them both. But the machine lay broken, silent. All she could hear was her own pulse, fast and uneven. She lifted her head toward Ethan, eyes full of disbelief. "You let her do this," she whispered. "You stood there." Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. Vanessa turned to him and said calmly, "She brought it on herself." Her tone was smooth, her voice steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her bracelet. The lie hung heavy in the air, as sharp and poisonous as the truth itself. Claire's vision dimmed at the edges. She lowered her head, both hands pressed over her belly. Her body shook with silent sobs, each one weaker than the last. The room smelled of blood and perfume. The light flickered once, as if the world itself had blinked in disbelief. In that moment, nothing else existed, not the hallway outside, not the life she once dreamed of, not even Ethan's face. There was only the sound of her shallow breathing and the weight of what had just happened. And in that terrible silence, as Claire's tears touched the cold tile floor, something inside her shifted forever. The sound of crashing metal had barely faded when the first scream echoed down the corridor. A nurse burst through the door, stopping cold at the sight of blood on the tile, and Claire curled on the floor. For a moment, time fractured into chaos. Another nurse followed, shouting orders, and the quiet maternity wing erupted into confusion. "Call a doctor!" someone yelled. The alarm button flashed red. Within seconds, voices filled the hallway, and the sterile calm of the hospital dissolved into panic. Vanessa stood frozen beside the exam table, her hands trembling, her mind racing to build the story that might save her. "She fell," she said quickly. "I tried to help her. She lost her balance." Her voice shook, but her words came smooth, rehearsed. The first lie was always the easiest. Ethan knelt beside his wife, his suit stained dark with blood. "Claire, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice breaking. Claire's eyes fluttered open, her breathing shallow. "Help the baby," she whispered. "Please." The nurse pressed her hand to Claire's pulse, eyes widening at the speed of her heartbeat. "Get a stretcher," the nurse ordered. "We're losing time." The corridor filled with footsteps, radio calls, and gasps from onlookers. Visitors and patients peeked from their rooms as whispers spread. Everyone wanted to know what had happened inside room 7. One woman said she heard shouting. Another swore she saw a man and a woman fighting. By the time security arrived, the story had already twisted into rumor. Vanessa straightened her posture, wiping invisible dust from her dress. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice steadying. "She's unstable. Everyone knows she's been under stress." The security officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, I need you to stay right here until we get statements." "Statements?" she repeated, feigning outrage. "I'm the one who tried to help her. You should be thanking me." Ethan looked up, his expression dazed. "Just let them work," he muttered. His voice lacked conviction, each word hollow. Claire was lifted onto the stretcher. Her blood left small smears across the white sheet as nurses hurried her toward the emergency wing. The monitors beeped rapidly, filling the hallway with a sound that made everyone stop and stare. "She's hemorrhaging," one nurse whispered. "Where's the obstetric team?" Vanessa watched them disappear down the corridor, then turned toward Ethan. "If anyone asks, she slipped. That's what happened. You saw it yourself." He stared at her, disbelief and fear mixing in his eyes. "Vanessa, I can't lie about this." "You don't have to lie," she snapped quietly. "You just have to stop her from ruining your life. Do you want the board to hear you let your wife cause a public scene in a hospital? Think about your reputation." His reputation. The words hit him harder than truth ever could. For years, everything he built rested on control. Control of his image, his success, his perfect life. He could already imagine tomorrow's headlines: "Millionaire's pregnant wife injured during hospital fight." The thought chilled him more than the sight of blood. When the elevator doors closed around Claire and the nurses, the noise in the hallway shifted from urgency to gossip. Phones appeared in hands. Someone whispered, "That's Ethan Hale, isn't it?" Another voice replied, "Yes, from Hale Development. His wife's pregnant." The speculation spread like smoke through dry air. Vanessa crossed her arms and faced the security officer. "Can I go now?" she demanded. "No, ma'am," he replied firmly. "We'll need an official statement for the incident report." "Oh, I already told you what happened," she said sharply. She tripped, panicked, and fell. "It's not my fault if she's dramatic." The officer nodded slowly, making notes on his clipboard. His eyes betrayed doubt. He had seen plenty of scenes like this, wealthy people trying to twist truth before the evidence could catch up. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of red across his temple without realizing it. The smell of iron clung to him. "I need to see her," he said under his breath. "I need to make sure she's all right." Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You need to think. You rush after her now, and everyone will assume guilt. Stay calm, act normal, and we'll fix this." He stared at her, feeling the words but not hearing them. Somewhere inside, the realization had already begun. There was no fixing what had just happened. Down the corridor, a small group of staff whispered near the nurse's station. "They're saying the marketing director hit her," one of them murmured. "No, kicked her," another corrected. "Right in the leg." The rumor spread faster than the truth could form. By the time it reached the lobby, it had become a scandal. When Dr. Elena Martinez arrived, the hallway parted to let her through. Her calm authority silenced the noise. "Where is she?" she asked. "Emergency obstetrics," a nurse answered. "Severe trauma, possible preeclampsia." "Doctor." Martinez turned to the security officer. "Keep everyone who was in that room available for questioning." Her gaze locked on Vanessa and Ethan for a moment, sharp and unyielding. "That includes both of them." Vanessa bristled. "You can't keep us here. I have nothing to do with this." "Then you have nothing to fear," Dr. Martinez replied, walking away. The hallway fell into uneasy quiet. Cameras near the ceiling blinked red. The security system recorded every movement, every expression. Later, that footage would tell the truth no one wanted to face. Ethan stood near the door, still staring at the floor, where his wife's blood remained in small, dark stains. His reflection in the metal cabinet looked like a stranger's, pale, shaken, hollow. Vanessa reached for his arm, but he stepped away. "I need to think," he said quietly. She smiled thinly. "Think fast. The press moves quicker than guilt." He didn't answer. He walked toward the elevators, not to find Claire but to escape the noise, the whispers, and the truth closing around him. Behind him, a janitor began mopping the floor. The sound of the mop dragging through blood was the only thing that broke the silence. The smell of bleach replaced the scent of perfume. By the time the hallway was clean, only the memory of what happened remained, a memory that could never be erased. Outside the maternity wing, the hospital lobby buzzed with quiet speculation. No one yet knew her name, but everyone had already taken sides. And as the doors to the emergency floor closed behind Claire Donovan, her world and Ethan's had already split beyond repair. The doors to the emergency unit swung open as the medical team rushed Claire into the trauma bay. Bright lights hit her face, blinding and cold. Voices layered over one another, sharp and urgent, pressure dropping, pulse unstable. "We need fluids now." Her body trembled uncontrollably as she clutched the sheet beneath her fingers. Somewhere deep inside, she still heard the faint echo of her baby's heartbeat through the portable monitor. It was weak but steady, a sound fighting to exist. "Doctor," Elena Martinez moved fast, gloved hands hovering over Claire's abdomen. "Get me her vitals. Set up an IV line. I want obstetrics and anesthesia here immediately." Nurses surrounded the table, attaching monitors, cutting through fabric, checking the bleeding. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. The beeping machines created a rhythm of tension, a kind of mechanical prayer. Claire's lips moved, but no words came out. Her skin looked pale under the fluorescent light, her breathing shallow. "Stay with me, honey," one nurse whispered, wiping sweat from her forehead. "You're going to be okay." The curtain rustled open again, and the chief of surgery, Dr. William Matthews, stepped inside. His silver hair and calm presence brought an instant hush to the room. He had been the hospital's director for 15 years, a man known for discipline, not sentiment. But as he looked at the woman on the bed, his composure shattered. For a moment, he froze. "Elena," he said quietly. "What's her name?" "Claire Donovan," the doctor replied without looking up. 30 years old, 7 months pregnant, blunt trauma to the abdomen, possible internal bleeding. The name struck him like lightning. His eyes widened. "Repeat that," he said. "Claire Donovan," she repeated, still focused on the monitor. He stepped closer, staring at the patient's face, the curve of her jaw, the faint scar near her eyebrow, the one he remembered from childhood summers. "Oh my God," he whispered. "She's my niece." The staff exchanged startled glances, unsure how to react. But Dr. Matthews straightened quickly, pulling his mask into place. "Nobody leaves this room," he ordered. "We do everything we can to save her and that baby." His tone left no room for hesitation. Claire's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then filled with confusion. "Uncle William?" she breathed weakly. He leaned down, his gloved hand brushing against hers. "I'm here, sweetheart," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now. I promise." Tears welled at the corners of her eyes. "He let her hurt me," she whispered. He just stood there, his jaw tightened. "Don't talk. You need to rest. We'll deal with that later." He looked toward Dr. Martinez. "How's the baby?" The younger doctor checked the ultrasound probe. "Fetal heart rate's unstable. We might have placental separation. We need to stabilize the mother first." "Do it," he said. "I'll assist." The team moved like a single organism, efficient and focused. Fluids ran through the IV lines. Blood pressure numbers flickered on the monitor. The sound of suction filled the air. Every movement felt like a battle against time. Outside the operating area, word of the emergency began to spread. Hospital staff whispered in corners, wondering why the director himself was assisting in a trauma case. Some said the patient was a VIP, others thought it was political. No one imagined it was personal. Inside, the minutes stretched thin. Claire drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind floating between the present and fragments of memory. She saw her uncle's kitchen in the summer light, smelled coffee, heard laughter. "You used to make pancakes," she murmured faintly, "with strawberries." Dr. Matthews swallowed hard. "And you always stole the first one," he said softly, forcing a small smile. "You're still stubborn. Hold on for me. Hold on for her." 9-2. The baby's heartbeat slowed, then steadied again. A nurse adjusted the oxygen mask, glancing at the clock. "We've got improvement," she said, heart rate stabilizing. Relief washed through the room like a collective exhale. Dr. Martinez looked up. "We're not out of danger yet, but she's responding." Dr. Matthews closed his eyes for half a second, whispering something only he could hear. Then he refocused, his voice calm and firm. "Prepare for ultrasound imaging. I want to see internal damage before we move forward." For the next 20 minutes, silence ruled, except for the hum of machines and short bursts of medical instructions. Sweat beaded across foreheads. The air felt heavy, thick with urgency and hope intertwined. At last, Dr. Martinez nodded. "She's stable enough for now. We'll monitor closely. The baby's heartbeat is fragile, but holding steady." Dr. Matthews stepped back, removing his gloves with slow precision. The weight of emotion he had kept buried for years pressed against his chest. He had lost contact with his sister after a family dispute decades ago. He hadn't known her daughter had grown up, married, and moved back to the city. Now, by some cruel twist of fate, she had been brought into his hospital broken and bleeding. He looked at her face, pale but peaceful now, and felt both guilt and purpose flooding in. "You found your way back to me," he whispered under his breath. "And I won't lose you again." Dr. Martinez approached him quietly. "We'll keep her under observation for the next few hours," she said. "She needs rest, the baby too." He nodded, his voice steady once more. "Good work, everyone. Keep full surveillance on her vitals. I want updates every 10 minutes. As the team dispersed, he remained by the bedside, watching the faint rise and fall of her chest. Claire slept, her hand still resting protectively over her stomach. The monitor beeped softly beside her, a fragile lullaby. Through the glass wall, he could see the hallway buzzing with controlled movement. Security officers spoke to staff. Reporters had not yet arrived, but he knew they would. There would be questions about the assault, about the people responsible, about the truth. He would face them when the time came. For now, only one thing mattered: the woman on the bed, and the life she carried. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper meant only for her. "You're safe, Claire. No one will hurt you again." For the first time that night, the rhythm of the machines evened out, calm and constant, like the slow return of order after chaos. But outside that room, the storm was only beginning to form. Morning light broke through the clouds outside Riverside Medical Center, but inside the walls of the administrative floor, the air remained tense. The night's chaos had left ripples through every department. Nurses whispered in corners, staff avoided eye contact, and rumors circulated like invisible smoke. Everyone had heard about the assault in the maternity ward. No one dared speak about the fact that the hospital's director had been inside the trauma bay all night. Dr. William Matthews stepped into his office, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. He had not slept, yet his mind was sharp, fueled by anger and responsibility. On his desk lay a preliminary report detailing the incident. At the bottom of the page were two familiar names: Ethan Hale and Vanessa Cole. He read them twice, each letter tightening his jaw. He pressed the intercom button. "Find both of them," he told his assistant. "Bring them to conference room B. I want security present." His voice was calm but absolute. No one questioned his tone. Downstairs, Vanessa sat in the waiting area outside administration. Her red dress from the previous night looked out of place under the sterile lights. The color that once gave her confidence now drew stares. Beside her, Ethan sat in silence, his hands clasped, his eyes hollow. The sleepless hours had stripped the arrogance from his face. The silence between them was louder than any accusation. The door opened, and a security officer gestured for them to follow. "Dr. Matthews will see you now." They entered the room together. The blinds were half drawn, letting in a narrow beam of morning sunlight that cut across the polished table. Dr. Matthews stood at the far end, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. The silver in his hair caught the light, lending him a quiet authority that filled the space before he even spoke. "Sit down," he said. His voice was steady but cold. Vanessa crossed her arms but obeyed. Ethan hesitated, then followed. Dr. Matthews studied them for a long moment before speaking again. "You both understand why you're here?" Vanessa forced a tight smile. "We already explained what happened. It was an accident." She slipped. He raised an eyebrow. "An accident," he repeated slowly. "Then explain to me why there's a security report detailing visible bruising consistent with impact, and why my staff had to clean blood from the exam room floor." Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed again. "I didn't touch her," she said. He turned his attention to Ethan. "And you, Mr. Hale? Were you a witness to this accident?" Ethan's eyes flickered toward Vanessa before meeting the doctor's gaze. "I didn't see everything," he said quietly. "It all happened fast." Dr. Matthews took a step forward. "Let me make something clear. This is not a social scandal. This is a criminal matter that took place inside a medical facility. A pregnant woman was injured under my roof. I don't care how much money you have, or how influential your name is. You will answer for it." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Are you threatening us?" she asked. He leaned forward slightly, his tone even sharper. "No, I'm reminding you that my responsibility is to the law, not to people who think they're above it." The words hung in the air. Ethan swallowed hard, unable to respond. "Doctor," Matthews turned to the security officer standing by the door. "I want all surveillance footage from the maternity corridor and room 7 reviewed immediately. Forward a copy to the police liaison. I'll handle the rest." Vanessa's confidence cracked. "You can't do that without a formal complaint." He looked at her, his expression calm but deadly serious. "The complaint has already been filed, by me, as the director of this hospital." Her eyes widened. "You can't be serious. You are—" "Oh, I am," he said quietly. "And if you're wondering why I care so deeply, it's because the woman you assaulted is my niece." The color drained from her face. Ethan looked up sharply, shock replacing exhaustion. "Your niece?" he repeated. Dr. Matthews nodded once. "Yes, Claire Donovan. And even if she were a stranger, I would do the same thing. But she is not a stranger. She is family. And after last night, this institution will stand on her side, not yours. That—" Vanessa rose to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is absurd. You're biased. You can't run an investigation when you're personally involved." He didn't move. "Then you're free to take that argument to court. I welcome it." Ethan finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Dr. Matthews, please. I didn't hurt her. I swear I didn't." I froze. I didn't know what to do. The doctor studied him, eyes narrowing slightly. "Then you're guilty of silence, Mr. Hale. And silence, when someone is being hurt, is its own form of cruelty." The room went still. The clock on the wall ticked audibly. Vanessa's confidence had dissolved entirely. Dr. Matthews walked to the door, signaling the meeting was over. "Security will escort you out. Both of you are prohibited from entering the maternity ward or contacting any member of the medical team until further notice." Vanessa started to protest, but he raised his hand. "Enough. I've heard enough lies for one morning. The next time you speak, it will be to the authorities." The officer stepped forward. Ethan stood slowly, shoulders slumped, the weight of guilt pressing down harder than pride ever could. Vanessa hesitated, then turned sharply, and left the room without looking back. When the door closed behind them, Dr. Matthews exhaled for the first time in hours. He walked toward the window, staring down at the parking lot below. Ambulances came and went. Life continued outside, indifferent to the storms inside. He placed a hand on the windowsill, his reflection faint in the glass. "You're safe now, Claire," he murmured to himself. "And I won't let them near you again." The morning sun brightened slowly, touching the edge of the city beyond. For the first time since the attack, the hospital felt steady again, anchored not by fear, but by the authority of a man who had finally chosen what was right. But deep in his chest, Dr. Matthews knew this was only the beginning. The world outside these walls was waiting for answers, and soon, justice would have to leave the hospital and face the public. The first light of morning filtered through the hospital blinds, brushing soft golden lines across the recovery room. Machines hummed quietly, their steady rhythm filling the silence like a heartbeat made of electricity and hope. Claire Donovan opened her eyes slowly. The world looked blurred at first, hazy from medication and exhaustion. She felt something warm wrapped around her hand. When her vision cleared, she saw her uncle, Dr. William Matthews, sitting beside the bed, still in his white coat. His eyes were tired but gentle, the kind that spoke of sleepless hours and unbroken resolve. "Uncle," she whispered, her voice thin and cracked. He leaned closer, squeezing her hand. "You're awake," he said softly. "You're safe now." Her lips trembled. "The baby?" His eyes softened, and for a moment the stern hospital director vanished, replaced by the man who once taught her how to ride a bike and patch scraped knees. "She's holding on," he said. "Her heart is strong. You both made it through the night." Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. "I thought I lost her," she whispered. "You didn't," he said. "You fought, and she fought with you." He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "You're both stronger than you think." Claire turned her head slightly, looking toward the window. Morning sunlight painted the wall in soft colors that reminded her of peace she no longer trusted. "I saw her face," she said suddenly. "Vanessa." She smiled after it happened, like she wanted me to suffer. Dr. Matthews' expression hardened. "Don't think about her," he said. "She's not your concern anymore." Claire swallowed, her voice shaking. "She kicked me, Uncle." She didn't hesitate. Ethan just stood there. He didn't even move. He closed his eyes for a moment, collecting the anger before it could spill over. When he spoke again, his tone was calm, but cold. "I know. I've read every report, watched the security footage, and spoken to the staff who were there. The truth is clear. What happened to you was not an accident, and it will not be ignored. Claire's breathing hitched. They won't stop, she said weakly. People like them never stop. They'll twist it. They'll make me look crazy. He straightened in his chair. Then we'll untwist it, he said. They might have money, but I have something stronger. The truth and the power to make it heard. No. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the quiet rhythm of the monitor filled the space between them. Claire's fingers tightened around his hand. I don't want revenge, she said softly. I just want my child to live without fear. His voice lowered. That's exactly what justice is, Claire, making sure no one else has to live in fear because of them. She looked at him, her eyes searching. You promise? I promise, he said. You rest now. I'll take care of the rest. Oh. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy with fatigue. As she drifted back toward sleep, she whispered, Thank you, Uncle William. He waited until her breathing steadied before standing. When he stepped into the hallway, the hospital was already awake. Nurses moved between rooms with quiet efficiency, but tension lingered in the air. Word of the assault had spread far beyond the maternity wing. He walked toward his office with purpose. His reflection in the glass panels looked older than he remembered, lined with the burden of both family and duty. He picked up the phone on his desk and dialed a familiar number. It's Matthews, he said when the other end answered. I need you to prepare a full legal report and submit a copy of the footage to the authorities. Yes, everything from the last 12 hours. Also, contact our public relations director. We'll be issuing a statement today. He paused, glancing out the window toward the city skyline. No spin, he added firmly. We're not protecting anyone's reputation. We're protecting what's right. He hung up and stood by the window for a long moment, his mind tracing through the details. Vanessa Cole would bring her lawyers. Ethan Hale would bring his influence. But neither could erase the truth recorded on hospital cameras or the testimonies of his staff. This fight would not be fought with violence, but with precision and exposure. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, flooding his office with light. When he finally returned to Claire's room, she was awake again, propped up on a pillow, a little color back in her cheeks. She looked fragile but alive, her strength quiet and steady. Did you sleep? He asked. A little, she said. I had a dream about the baby. She was laughing. He smiled faintly. That's a good dream. She nodded. You were there too. He pulled a chair close. I'll be here every day until you walk out of this place. Her eyes glistened. You really think we'll win? I don't think, he said. I know. The room grew still again. Outside the window, the world went on. Cars, clouds, and the ordinary sounds of life that no longer felt ordinary to either of them. He placed his hand over hers once more. You've done your part, Claire. Now let me do mine. Yeah. She exhaled slowly, her fear giving way to exhaustion and fragile hope. Okay, she said. But promise me something. Don't let them twist what happened. Don't let them turn me into a story they can control. He nodded solemnly. I won't. The truth will belong to you, not them. The light in the room softened as afternoon settled. He stood, smoothing his coat. Rest now, he said quietly. You need strength for what comes next. As he stepped into the hallway, a flicker of movement caught his eye through the glass. Down the corridor, a woman in a dark suit was speaking with security. Her red hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights. It was Vanessa Cole, back in the building, flanked by her lawyer. A look of arrogance painted across her face. Dr. Matthews paused. The exhaustion that had weighed on him turned into quiet determination. He watched her for a long second, then turned toward his office. For every act of cruelty, there would be an answer. And this time, it would begin with him. The city woke restless. Morning news anchors spoke in urgent tones as headlines flashed across every screen. Violence in Riverside Medical Center. Pregnant woman assaulted by business executive's associate. The words were bold, unforgiving, and impossible to ignore. Every network ran the footage. Every radio host dissected the story. And social media burned with outrage. In less than 12 hours, Vanessa Cole's name had become a synonym for cruelty. Inside her downtown apartment, the walls of glass reflected her face from a dozen angles. She stood barefoot in front of the television, her crimson robe loose at the shoulders, her hair unkempt from a sleepless night. The news replayed the hospital corridor footage. Though the camera caught only fragments, it was enough. A figure in a red dress, a sudden movement, a body collapsing. The audio of Claire's cry, faint but unmistakable, echoed through the room. Vanessa grabbed the remote and muted the sound, but silence didn't save her. Her phone vibrated again and again on the counter, lighting up with messages. Some from reporters, some from sponsors, some from numbers she didn't recognize. Every notification felt like a bruise. She poured herself a glass of white wine and tried to steady her breathing. "It will blow over," she whispered to her reflection in the glass wall. "It always does." But even as she said it, her voice faltered. On the opposite side of town, the boardroom of Hale Development was in chaos. Ethan sat at the head of the long marble table, surrounded by his partners and legal advisors. Charts of plunging stock values glowed on the wall screen. "We're down 20% in a single day," one of the directors said. "The media won't let go of it. You need to make a public statement." Ethan rubbed his temples. "I already said I wasn't involved." Then why does your mistress's name appear in every headline?" another voice snapped. "People think this company protects abusers. They're boycotting our developments. Investors are furious." He leaned back, exhausted, his mind trapped between guilt and pride. Every word from his lawyers blurred into noise. The empire he had built on charm and control was collapsing, and it all began with a single moment of silence, his own. Back in the apartment, Vanessa opened her laptop. The first email she read was from a luxury brand she had represented for 5 years. Partnership terminated effective immediately. The next was from her publicist. Crisis team recommends temporary social media deactivation and legal defense strategy. The polite tone made it worse. Her life was being erased through formal sentences and polite signatures. She scrolled through her online profiles. Thousands of comments flooded each post. Once, her name was celebrated for beauty and ambition. Now it was cursed in every language imaginable. "Monster. How could you kick a pregnant woman? You belong in prison." Her hand shook as she closed the laptop. "They don't know the truth," she muttered. They didn't see what really happened, but even she no longer believed the lie. By afternoon, reporters had gathered outside her apartment building. Cameras flashed as she stepped into the lobby with sunglasses hiding her swollen eyes. "Miss Cole," one shouted, "do you have anything to say about the assault?" Another yelled, "Was the victim your lover's wife?" The questions came like stones. She pushed past them, but the sound of her name followed her down the street. Her lawyer met her in the car. "Damage control starts now," he said. "We'll claim emotional distress. Say you were provoked. We can use your medical history to show temporary panic." Vanessa stared out the window. "You mean lie." "Call it narrative," he replied. "Right now, truth doesn't matter. Perception does." She turned her head, watching the blur of city lights. "They already decided what I am," she said quietly. "No narrative will change that." At a nearby cafe, 2 women scrolled through their phones, whispering. "Look, that's her," one said, showing a picture of Vanessa taken that morning. The other shook her head. "She should be in jail. Poor woman in the hospital. I heard she almost lost her baby." The words carried, drifting through the air like smoke. Vanessa heard them as she passed by. For the first time, she felt the sting of being seen not as admired, but as despised. She walked faster, heart pounding. By evening, the official hospital statement went public. Dr. Matthews' words appeared on every major network. Riverside Medical Center stands for truth, compassion, and accountability. We will cooperate fully with law enforcement to ensure justice for Mrs. Claire Donovan. His voice was measured, but the moral authority behind it was devastating. It left no room for denial. Sponsors withdrew completely. Her modeling agency suspended her contract. The charity gala she was supposed to host next month replaced her with another ambassador. The speed of her erasure was surgical. Within hours, her social life, her career, and her image vanished into digital dust. As the sun sank behind the city skyline, Vanessa returned to her apartment, the once luxurious space now echoing with emptiness. She walked through the living room, stepping over scattered newspapers, the sound of her heels echoing against marble. On the television, a news anchor summarized the day's events. Authorities confirm ongoing investigation. Sources suggest video evidence will play a key role. She stood still, watching herself on screen. The broadcast played her smiling face from a past interview, a clip from a charity event. "I believe kindness changes the world," she had said then. The irony made her stomach twist. The screen switched to a photo of Claire in the hospital, pale but alive. The caption read, "Miracle Mother expected to recover." Vanessa's hand tightened around her glass until it cracked. Wine spilled across her fingers, glinting red in the blue glow of the television. She sank onto the couch, staring at the image of the woman she had tried to destroy, the woman who had somehow survived. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant judgment. Inside, Vanessa sat surrounded by reflections of herself, each one darker than the last. She turned off the TV, but the silence that followed was worse than noise. For the first time in years, she felt truly alone. And somewhere in that silence, a new fear began to grow, the fear that her fall had only just begun. The city felt different that morning. The sky was still gray, but it no longer looked heavy. It looked like a curtain ready to lift. Inside Riverside Medical Center, the air buzzed with quiet purpose. Doctors moved through the hallways as if nothing extraordinary had happened, yet everyone knew something had changed. For the first time in weeks, justice was not just whispered about, it had a direction. Dr. William Matthews sat behind his desk, reviewing a folder filled with signed statements. Witness reports, medical logs, and surveillance images were neatly arranged in chronological order. Across from him sat Eleanor Donovan, Claire's mother, her silver hair tied in a simple bun. Despite her calm appearance, her eyes burned with the determination of a woman who had watched her daughter bleed and survive. "So this is it," Eleanor said, her voice steady. "The evidence that proves everything." Dr. Matthews nodded. "Every testimony matches the footage. There's no room left for denial." He closed the folder carefully. "We're taking this to the district attorney's office today." A knock on the door interrupted them. The nurse from the maternity ward entered, holding another document. "Sir, the security officer who was on duty that night just submitted his statement. He confirms Vanessa Cole was inside the restricted area without authorization." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. She walked in like she owned the place. She thought no one would ever stop her. Dr. Matthews signed the report. "Now someone will." He looked at the nurse. "Thank you. You may go." When the door closed, he turned toward Eleanor again. "I've already spoken to Janet Morrison, the assistant district attorney. She's willing to take the case. She believes we can secure charges of assault and obstruction of medical procedure." Eleanor's eyes softened with relief. "Claire deserves this. Every woman who's been silenced deserves this." No. Later that morning, the three of them met in a private conference room at the courthouse. Janet Morrison was a sharp, composed woman in her 40s, with eyes that missed nothing. She flipped through the files with quick precision. "You have a solid foundation here," she said. "The video footage will speak for itself, but the eyewitnesses give it undeniable weight." Dr. Matthews leaned forward. "How soon can we proceed?" "Soon," Janet replied, "but we'll need Claire's statement on record. When she's strong enough, I'll come to her directly. I want her to know this case isn't just about punishment, it's about precedent." Eleanor glanced up. "What do you mean?" Janet smiled faintly. "This case could help change how assaults on pregnant women are prosecuted in the state. We've been pushing for reforms for years. Claire's case might be the spark we need." For a long moment, the room fell silent. The weight of that possibility settled between them like a quiet promise. Across town, Ethan Hale sat inside his office, surrounded by lawyers. His empire was shrinking fast. Half of his investors had withdrawn, and the board was demanding answers. Every attempt to fix his image made things worse. Vanessa had vanished from the public eye, and no one believed his claims of ignorance anymore. A junior lawyer slid a document toward him. "You've been subpoenaed, sir. You'll need to testify." Ethan looked up sharply. "Testify about what?" "About the night of the incident," the lawyer said. "Dr. Matthews filed formal charges. There's an official criminal case now." He sank into his chair, feeling the cold truth settle into his bones. The woman he once dismissed as fragile now stood behind an entire institution, and the world was listening to her side of the story. The next day, the courthouse steps overflowed with reporters. Cameras clicked, microphones extended, and headlines shouted across the morning air. Hospital assault case reaches court. Director confirms niece's testimony. Public calls for accountability. Inside, the tension was electric. Dr. Matthews and Eleanor sat side by side at the front row, watching as the preliminary hearing began. Claire, still recovering, was not yet present, but her written testimony had been submitted to the judge. The prosecution outlined the evidence with calm authority. When the video footage played, the courtroom fell silent. The faint audio of Claire's cry echoed against the marble walls. Vanessa sat at the defendant's table, her face pale under the harsh lights. She wore a black suit, her usual confidence replaced by defiance, thinly veiled as composure. Her lawyer objected repeatedly, but the objections only highlighted the weight of the evidence. Ethan sat behind her, summoned as a witness. His jaw clenched as he watched the screen. He had convinced himself that silence could protect him, that neutrality would keep his hands clean. But as the footage played, neutrality turned into guilt, captured forever in his stillness. When the hearing ended, the crowd outside erupted into noise. Protesters held signs demanding justice. Cameras followed every movement, every reaction. For the first time, the story no longer belonged to rumor, it belonged to truth. Eleanor stepped out of the courthouse with quiet dignity, shielding her face from the flashes. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Donovan, how is your daughter? Do you believe justice will be served?" She paused, looking directly at the cameras. "My daughter survived something no woman should endure. Justice isn't a belief, it's a necessity." Her voice carried strength that silenced even the most persistent reporter. Across the plaza, Ethan exited through a side door, escorted by his lawyer. A group of onlookers recognized him immediately. Someone shouted his name. Another called him a coward. He kept his head down, his polished shoes splashing through puddles as if each step carried shame instead of power. From the car parked across the street, Dr. Matthews watched the scene unfold. Eleanor sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Through the windshield, they could see the chaos that once belonged entirely to Ethan and Vanessa. Now it belonged to the truth. "Do you think he'll ever admit what he did?" Eleanor asked quietly. Dr. Matthews shook his head. "He doesn't have to. The world already has." She looked out the window, her voice softer. "Claire will want to see this someday, to know what her pain changed." He nodded slowly. "She'll see it. She'll see everything." Rain began to fall again, gentle and clean this time, washing over the courthouse steps like a benediction. The storm had not ended, but its purpose had shifted. For the first time, the power belonged to the ones who had been hurt, not the ones who had caused it. And as the cameras turned toward the courthouse doors once more, a new chapter was already waiting inside, one that would carry the name Claire Donovan into history. The courthouse stood beneath a pale winter sky, its marble steps crowded with reporters, cameras, and protest signs. People lined the street, holding umbrellas and banners that read "Justice for Claire." The sound of voices blended with the low hum of live broadcasts. Inside, the air was thick with expectation. For weeks, the city had followed every headline. Now, the truth would be spoken where everyone could hear it. Claire Donovan entered the courtroom slowly, her steps measured but steady. She wore a light sky-blue dress that fell softly around her knees. The color was gentle, but it carried meaning. It was the same shade she had worn the day she nearly lost everything. When she reached her seat beside Dr. Matthews, the clicking of cameras filled the room. He gave her a reassuring nod, his hand resting briefly on hers before the session began. Judge Patricia Hernandez presided with calm authority. Her voice carried easily across the packed chamber. "This court is now in session. The case of the state versus Vanessa Cole." The murmurs died instantly. Assistant District Attorney Janet Morrison rose first. Her presence commanded attention. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is not about wealth, image, or influence. It is about violence. It is about a woman who believed she could harm another and walk away untouched." She walked toward the jury box, holding a single sheet of paper. "The evidence will show that Vanessa Cole entered a restricted hospital ward, confronted Mrs. Claire Donovan Hale, and intentionally caused bodily harm to both her and her unborn child." Every word landed like a strike against the quiet. On the opposite side, Vanessa sat beside her lawyer, her expression unreadable. She wore a black suit, her hair tied tightly back. but the confidence that once defined her had vanished. Her attorney adjusted his glasses and whispered something in her ear, but she didn't respond. When the prosecution presented the hospital footage, the courtroom became utterly silent. The grainy video played on the large screen. Vanessa stepping forward, Claire falling. The sound of a cry filled the room. Some jurors looked away. Others clenched their jaws. Janet spoke again. "What you just saw is not an accident. It is an act of cruelty, and it nearly cost 2 lives. You come." The defense objected, but the judge overruled. Later, Claire took the stand. The room held its breath as she was sworn in. Her voice trembled at first, but the strength in her eyes anchored every word. "That day, I was there for a routine checkup. I never imagined it would end in blood. She looked at me with hate I can't explain. I begged her to stop. Her throat tightened. When she kicked me, I thought I was losing my child. I remember falling, hearing the machine crash, and feeling everything go quiet inside me." She paused, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. "I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting for my child's right to be born in a world where cruelty isn't power." The courtroom stayed silent for several seconds after she spoke. Even the clicking of cameras stopped. Then the judge nodded gently. "You may step down, Mrs. Donovan." Dr. Matthews looked at his niece with quiet pride. He had seen hundreds of testimonies in his career, but none like this. It was not law that gave her power that morning, it was truth. By afternoon, every news outlet in the country carried her words. Television anchors repeated them. Talk shows debated them. Hashtags spread across social media, number Justice for Claire and number The Claire Case. The story reached beyond the courtroom. It became a symbol. When Vanessa's lawyer tried to argue that his client acted out of fear, Janet Morrison's voice cut through the chamber. "Fear does not excuse cruelty," she said. "It exposes it." The defense faltered. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, not from guilt, but from losing the control she had clung to for so long. Outside the courthouse, crowds chanted for change. Protesters held signs that read, "Protect mothers, protect lives." Inside the prosecutor's office, Janet and Dr. Matthews worked late into the night. He spread out legal documents across the table. "We can't let this stop here," he said. "This case can set a precedent." Janet nodded. "We've been pushing for stronger laws to protect pregnant women from assault. Now we have the story, the evidence, and the public will." They drafted the proposal together, line by line. The Claire Act. It called for harsher penalties against those who harmed expectant mothers and for emergency protections in hospitals nationwide. It was written not just for Claire, but for every woman who might face what she had. When the bill reached the state legislature a week later, it passed unanimously through committee. Lawmakers quoted Claire's testimony on the floor. One senator said, "Her courage gave this law a voice." Back at the hospital, Claire watched the live broadcast from her recovery room. The screen showed the chamber filled with applause as the bill advanced. She pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed. Dr. Matthews stood behind her, a quiet smile softening his usually stern face. "This is your voice echoing beyond what they tried to silence," he said gently. Claire turned to him, her eyes shining. "I didn't think anyone would listen." "They listened," he said. "And now they'll remember." "No?" The evening sky outside turned shades of gold and rose, the city bathed in light. Reporters called the moment the Claire Act victory. Her name, once tied to pain, now carried a meaning larger than herself. But even as celebration spread, the trial was not over. The verdict would come next week. The nation waited for it, hearts divided between outrage and hope. That night, Claire stood by the window of her hospital room, watching the city's lights flicker below. She touched her belly gently, feeling the faint movement of life. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "justice won't just be an idea. It will have a name." Outside, the courthouse clock struck 9, each chime echoing through the cold night air, counting down to the morning when the world would finally hear the verdict. The courthouse was silent when the verdict came. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows, soft enough to sound like a heartbeat. Claire sat between Dr. Matthews and her mother, Eleanor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The entire nation was watching. Every network carried the broadcast live. After weeks of testimony, tears, and headlines, everything came down to this moment. Judge Hernandez adjusted her glasses and looked at the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson stood, paper trembling in his hands. We have, Your Honor. He handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. A pause filled the room, brief but unbearable. In the case of the state versus Vanessa Cole, the judge read, we find the defendant guilty on all counts: aggravated assault, intentional harm, and obstruction of medical procedure. A sound escaped the crowd, a mix of gasps and quiet sobs. Claire closed her eyes as tears welled up. For the first time in months, she felt the weight inside her chest lift, replaced by something that felt like breath, like release. The judge continued, given the severity of the crime and its impact, this court sentences the defendant to 8 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for the first 5. Restitution and community service will follow upon release. Vanessa sat frozen, her face pale. The camera lights captured every flicker of disbelief that crossed her features. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she didn't respond. For years, she had controlled the narrative with charm and manipulation. Now the story had slipped entirely from her hands. Judge Hernandez turned to Ethan Hale. Mr. Hale, as a witness and former spouse, this court finds your behavior negligent, morally reprehensible, though not criminal. However, your silence contributed to the harm done. The civil proceedings against you will continue under separate jurisdiction. Ethan lowered his head. His once impeccable composure was gone. Outside the courthouse, protesters chanted his name alongside hers, demanding accountability. The empire he had built on reputation and charm had crumbled into dust. The judge's final words echoed through the chamber. This case has reminded us that justice is not for the powerful, but for the truthful. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck once. The sound cut through the silence like thunder breaking a long night. Reporters surged forward as security escorted Vanessa out. Cameras flashed. She shielded her face, but there was no escaping the glare. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing like a countdown to oblivion. Outside, rain mixed with the light of flashbulbs, blurring her silhouette into something ghostly. Ethan followed moments later, his lawyer beside him, his head lowered. He ignored the shouts and the microphones. The crowd's anger was louder than any question. "You let it happen!" someone yelled. "She could have died!" He didn't respond. The sound of his silence had already become his confession. Inside the courtroom, Claire remained seated. The reporters had moved on, the chaos fading to murmurs. Dr. Matthews reached for her hand. "It's over," he said softly. She shook her head, tears streaming freely now. "No, it's beginning." He smiled faintly. "Then let this beginning be yours." Eleanor stood beside them, her eyes glistening. "You did it, sweetheart. You turned pain into something greater." As they walked out together, the crowd outside parted like water around a stone. Cameras turned, not on the guilty, but on her. For once, the attention didn't feel invasive. It felt earned. Reporters shouted questions. "Mrs. Donovan, how do you feel?" Claire paused, her voice steady. "Grateful," she said, "for life, for truth, for every woman who stood with me, even when I couldn't stand for myself." Her words traveled far beyond the courthouse steps. They aired across the country within minutes, replayed on news loops, quoted in headlines. Grateful for life, for truth. The phrase became a symbol of grace and victory. 2 weeks later, the world shifted again. The hospital room smelled faintly of flowers and rain. Claire lay on the bed, her face pale but radiant. Machines beeped softly around her, steady and calm. Dr. Matthews stood beside her, holding her hand as he had on the night she almost lost everything. "You did well," he said quietly. "Both of you." The nurse smiled as she placed the small bundle into Claire's arms. The baby stirred, a faint whimper breaking the silence. Claire looked down at her daughter's face, pink, tiny, perfect, and the tears she had held back for so long finally fell. "She made it," Claire whispered. "She really made it." Eleanor entered quietly, her voice trembling with emotion. "What will you name her?" Claire smiled through her tears. "Grace," she said. "Because after everything, that's what's left." The room filled with gentle laughter and the sound of a newborn breathing. Outside, the sky cleared for the first time in days. Sunlight poured through the hospital window, warming Claire's face, and the child resting against her chest. "Doctor," Matthews looked at them, pride softening the lines of his face. "Your story will change lives, Claire. It already has." She glanced up at him. "It wasn't just mine, it was ours. You, Mom, Janet, everyone who refused to stay silent." He nodded, emotion caught in his throat. "Then promise me something. When the world asks you what justice felt like, tell them it sounded like her heartbeat." Claire looked down at the baby again, her tiny fingers curling around her own. "I will," she said. "I'll tell her everything." For a long time, no one spoke. The room was filled only with light, quiet, and the faint rhythm of life reborn. Outside, reporters waited, unaware of the miracle unfolding behind the glass. Inside, the woman who had once been broken by cruelty now held in her arms the purest proof that love could survive anything. Claire kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Welcome home, Grace," she whispered. "You're the reason the world still believes in mercy." Oh. Through the window, sunlight struck the hospital's nameplate, where a new plaque had been added that morning, dedicated to survivors of violence and to the power of truth. The light reflected across the walls, bright and endless. Tomorrow, the story would move beyond headlines and courts. It would belong to every woman who refused to be silenced. A year passed, and the world had changed. The city that once whispered about tragedy now spoke of renewal. Outside Riverside Medical Center, the morning air was crisp, touched with the scent of rain. The bronze plaque by the entrance caught the light of the rising sun, the Claire Donovan Healing Wing, dedicated to the strength of survivors. Inside the lobby, the rhythm of the hospital felt different. It no longer carried the echo of panic and fear. It pulsed with life, calm and steady. Nurses greeted Claire as she walked down the corridor, her light blue dress swaying softly with each step. A small girl toddled beside her, clutching her hand, her laughter bouncing off the white walls. Grace had her mother's eyes, deep and steady, and her father's faint dimple when she smiled. The sight of her brought smiles from everyone they passed. Claire carried a folder under her arm labeled Patient Advocacy Program. She now worked as a consultant, helping women who faced trauma and recovery, guiding them through the very halls where she once fought for her life. When she reached the new conference room, Dr. Matthews was already waiting. His hair had grown a little grayer, but his energy remained sharp. "You're early," he said with a smile. "I had help," she replied, glancing down at Grace, who was busy playing with a stethoscope someone had dropped. He chuckled. "Looks like we found our next doctor." Grace looked up at him and giggled. "Uncle Will," she said, the words bright and clear. He bent down to pick her up, his face softening completely. "You have no idea how much light you bring, little one." Claire smiled, watching them. "She doesn't just bring light," she said. "She reminds me what it means to stay alive." They sat together in the meeting room, reviewing plans for the hospital's new outreach program. The initiative, funded by grants and private donations, would provide legal and psychological aid to women affected by domestic or medical abuse. Dr. Matthews leaned back, folding his glasses. "We've already received requests from other hospitals. They want to model their programs after ours. You've started something that will outlast all of us." Claire looked out the window, where the sun climbed higher over the skyline. "It wasn't just me. It was you, Mom, Janet, everyone who refused to let it end with a verdict." He nodded, pride glimmering behind the exhaustion of endless work. "Still, it took courage to walk back into this building. Most people would have run from it forever." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I needed to come back to prove it no longer controls me." A soft knock came at the door. Eleanor entered, holding a bouquet of white lilies. "You two have turned this place into a symbol," she said warmly. "It's strange, walking into this hospital and feeling peace instead of fear." Claire stood to hug her mother. "You were the first one who believed this wasn't the end," she said. "You were right." Eleanor brushed her daughter's hair gently. "It's not about being right, sweetheart. It's about remembering that healing doesn't erase scars, it just teaches us how to live with them." Later that afternoon, they held a small ceremony to dedicate the new wing. Reporters attended, but this time there were no flashing lights, no chaos, only quiet applause as Dr. Matthews introduced Claire to the podium. She took a deep breath, the baby blue fabric of her dress glowing softly in the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. "When I first came here," she began, "I was terrified. I didn't think I would ever walk again, or speak again, or believe again. But this place gave me back my life. Not just because of medicine, but because of compassion. Today, we dedicate this wing to every person who thought they were broken beyond repair. You're not. You never were." Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. "My daughter was born in this hospital. Her name is Grace, because that's what saved me. Grace isn't perfection. It's survival with kindness still intact." Applause filled the room, gentle but heartfelt. Dr. Matthews wiped at his glasses discreetly. Eleanor smiled through tears. After the ceremony, Claire walked alone down the hallway toward the maternity ward. Each step echoed against the tile like memory turned solid. She paused at the door of the room where it had all begun. The same number still hung there, room 7. She stepped inside quietly. The walls had been repainted, the machines replaced, but the energy of the space lingered. She ran her hand along the edge of the bed, remembering the sound of monitors, the smell of disinfectant, the taste of fear. Grace peeked in behind her, curiosity lighting her face. "Mama, what's this room?" Claire knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "It's where you and I learned how strong love can be," she said softly. Grace smiled, small fingers curling around her mother's hand. "Can we go home now?" "Yes, sweetheart," Claire said. "We can go home." As they walked out, sunlight spilled across the floor. Claire paused for a moment, glancing back. She placed a small bouquet of light blue flowers on the windowsill, her quiet tradition. "For the ones who couldn't make it," she whispered. Outside, the air shimmered with the warmth of spring. The city seemed calmer now, its rhythm slower, wiser. The Claire Act had been officially enacted 6 months ago, transforming policy into protection. Every time a new hospital adopted the reform, a letter arrived for Claire, signed simply, "In your name, with gratitude." That night, back at home, Claire tucked Grace into bed. The child's soft breathing filled the room. Claire sat beside her, tracing gentle circles on her tiny hand. "You'll grow up in a world that's kinder," she whispered. "That's my promise to you." She rose, walked to the window, and opened the curtains. Outside, dawn was already rising again. Endless, golden, forgiving. Claire closed her eyes, letting the light touch her face. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, steady and pure. The world kept moving forward, carrying her story not as tragedy, but as proof of endurance. She smiled, whispering to herself, "We survived, and that's enough." Behind her, the baby monitor glowed softly. In its quiet rhythm, she could almost hear a heartbeat that once faltered but never stopped. The sound of life, of justice, of hope reborn.